Okay, welcome everyone. It's 3 o'clock. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Thank you. Item 1B, approval of agenda.
I move that the agenda for the February 27th, 2025 special meeting be approved.
Motion by Cindy Shaw,
Second.
supported by Mr. Campbell. Is there any discussion on the motion? Okay, hearing none. Mr. Scott,
Yes.
Mr. Gogolewski,
Yes.
Mr. Keller,
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
and I am a yes. That motion passes. Item 1C, approval of minutes for the February 17th, 2025 meeting.
I move that the minutes of the February 17th, 2025 regular meeting be approved.
Motion from Mrs. Shaw,
Support.
supported by Mr. Campbell. Any discussion on the minutes?
Yeah, I did have a question on the minutes, actually. So policy 1241, 5611, and opt-in policy. I noticed below some of the action, there was a comment added to the notes. It says Superintendent Hughes shared that the opt-out process will remain in place. I guess I was just trying to understand the distinction in including that note. I'm frankly all for adding that kind of commentary, but normally that's not something that we have added. So I guess just trying to understand the difference in cases where we've not been able to add things like that to the notes because it wasn't explicitly an action.
Sure. I do not have an answer for that question. Mr. Hughes, would you like to chime in?
No, when we did the minutes, we just wanted to make sure that it was really clear to the public that while the opt-in was discontinued, the opt-out would continue. If you don't want it there, we can get rid of it. That was just the intent.
Thank you, Mr. Hughes.
Any further discussion?
I mean, on that point, I guess if I too am all for the opt-out language, I think, though, in that conversation that we had at the meeting, it was made clear that there is no official policy, correct?
Right.
So right now, we just have kind of an unofficial agreement that there is some opt-out, but no common ground on how that will be offered to parents or what it applies to. And I can speak later today that there have been diversity trainings in the district just in the last 8 days, which parents were not notified about and not offered an opt-out. So I guess that the way it's worded in there, I think is unclear to the public as to what our official policy is.
I believe what's been discussed at the board table before is that it does say opt-out process, not policy, and that until we have the material that this would apply to, we don't have an opt-out form created. Correct, Mr. Hughes?
Correct.
So we're telling the public that they can opt out, but giving them no clear direction on how to do so, and not even telling them when these trainings occur. So I find some hypocrisy in having that in our minutes in that form. Again, I would support Mr. Keller in having some real tangible policy that we could offer to parents of this community.
Well, I'm going to tell you, Jeff, that I disagree with you. We said that we were going to provide the trainings we put together through the work that was being done, that Mr. Gugleski and Ms. Coleman also sat on that group with Mr. Minsker and Mrs. Gregory. That's what we were talking about. For instance, there's a student survey that I've posted, sent out to parents with an opt-out form available if they don't want to take that. So that's what we're talking about. And so anytime that we have those materials ready, for instance, just yesterday, I shared what we've been working on. And again, Mr. Gugaleski and Mrs. Coleman can speak to that if they wish to, on the work we've done with Sam. And so we've also ensured the community that here's the materials as they exist today. And when we do this in 25, 26, you'll be able to opt your child out of it. So that's what we've been trying to accomplish.
Yeah,
Well-
and I think you're specific to one piece of curriculum or training materials that you're building, not to the policy that this board rescinded last week regarding DEI, SEL, and CRT. And there has been no policy formulated to give parents an opt-out on those things. Those things continue to be in our curriculum, in our handbook, in our procedures, in our schools, without an opt-out for parents. And you're talking about an opt-out for one single training scheduled for 12 months from now. That's not what the rest of us in this room are talking about.
Now, you
We're
have a
talking
different, excuse the interruption, but our definitions are different, obviously. So until the board can figure that out, until the EAO can figure that out, we're in a standstill.
Well, this has nothing to do even with the EO. This is about giving parents the rights they deserve to decide if they want their children indoctrinated with the divisive teaching materials that you're currently using. That's what this is about.
So, Mr. Scott, if I could interject, I appreciate the point that you're making. How are you suggesting that we proceed with the minutes? That's the motion that's on the table.
I don't think the minutes are honest in the way they're formulated, and I think they give a false impression to this community that there are options available, which there currently are not.
So are you going to motion to amend the minutes? The motion on the table is to approve them as presented. Unless there's an amendment or any further discussion, we will vote on the motion that's on the table.
I motion to amend the minutes.
And Mr. Gogolewski, how would you like that amendment?
I would just like that to be stricken and taken out of the minutes.
Can you read the verbiage for me, because I don't have it right in front of me?
Right, it's on the second page, and what I want removed is Superintendent Hughes shared that the opt-out process will remain in place.
Okay, hold on, please.
And we can, at our next meeting, formulate or at least discuss the policy that we should have in place for opt-out and create it.
Okay, so I have a motion to amend the minutes. Mr. Gogolewski has motioned to strike, quote, Superintendent Hughes shared that the opt-out process will remain in place, end quote.
Second.
All right, so motion by Gogolewski, second by Scott. Any discussion on that motion? Motion to amend. Okay, we'll vote on the motion to amend the minutes by striking out the statement that I read previously. Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Gogolewski?
Yes.
Mr. Keller?
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw?
No.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
And I am a no. That motion, actually, does that motion carry? Yes. It's 4-2. Okay. So we've amended the minutes. So now the motion on the table is to pass the minutes as they are now amended. Is there any further discussion? Again, we'll take a roll call vote. This is approval of the minutes as amended by Mr. Gogoleski, support by Scott, to remove Superintendent Hughes shared that the opt-out process will remain in place. Mr. Scott,
Yes.
Mr. Gogoleski,
Yes.
Mr. Keller,
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
and I am a yes. That motion carries. Moving on to item 1D, call to the public. I will use this at 2.5 minutes to give you a high sign. We ask that everyone please be respectful. Thank you. And be courteous. Please let people have their time. And please do not interrupt. First up is Tiffany Baird.
Good afternoon. Is this on? All right. What I would like to make clear this afternoon is that this is not an emergency meeting at all. This is just smoke and mirrors. What you're voting on is not an emergency, nor will it accomplish what has been advertised by Mr. Hughes. This is nothing more than smoke and mirrors. It's a move that is designed to appear like action's being taken when in reality, no real change is going to occur. What parents need to understand is there are 2 different DEI groups existing in Hartland schools. One is headed by staff, the other has board members involved. So part of me wonders if getting rid of this committee is to get Mr. Board Member Glenn Gogoleski off of this committee, so he's not involved in these training programs anymore. Pausing this committee allows the staff-led committee to continue DEI actions without board or public monitoring it. The real issue here is that the DOJ contract remains in place. Superintendent Hughes, along with 4 board members, have repeatedly said adhering to this contract is necessary, otherwise we will be in legal trouble. Yet now that DEI is not supposed to be taught any longer, at risk of losing federal funding, we are pausing one committee but not truly removing the curriculum from our district. Why is it suddenly no longer a fear of legal trouble? This is nothing more than a stall, hoping it will quiet parents down, like myself. However, it will result in a loss of federal funding and most likely a lawsuit because this district failed to act upon the presidential executive order. If this truly is a move to follow the federal guidelines, I challenge Superintendent Hughes and this board to immediately dissolve the DOJ contract and eliminate all DEI committees and curriculum effective today. Then and only then will we believe this meeting was not intended to be a disingenuous distraction from the parents who fight this curriculum. Parents are done being ignored and we're done being lied to, so end this now. Thank you.
Anthony McKenna.
I'll keep my comments very brief. I think that we should get rid of the acronyms. I think that we should not say DEI. We should say diversity, equity, and inclusion. If you guys are against it, say it, mean it, own it.
Aaron McKenna.
I think you guys are all very well aware that diversity, equity, inclusion is more than just the words. It's embedded in respect, reason, responsibility. Just getting rid of the DEI acronym, fine. I don't see how our curriculum is teaching students DEI. They're teaching them to be good human beings, to respect others, be responsible, and have reason. And that includes being inclusive. There's no way around it. I applaud the board for taking action to bring this forward and try and follow the executive orders as much as I disagree with them, trying to follow them so that we don't lose federal fundings, because that is very important. But I also did a search on our website, and the word diversity, equity, and inclusion only comes up for the board committee. That's the only words I could find. Granted, it was a very quick search. Take that out, fine. But our kids will, somebody else mentioned earlier about SEL. SEL is not DEI. See, it is social emotional learning. It means it is how our teachers will educate our students, their students on classroom behavior management. If the teachers can't have classroom behavior management, they can't teach English. They can't teach math. They are just going to be managing behaviors. Kindergarten is all about social emotional learning, figuring out how to be in a classroom with others, be with people that are different than you. Because even if our skin colors aren't different, we are different. We work differently. But in the real world, you have to learn to work with everyone. Thank you.
Connie Robinson.
Good afternoon. Since 2021, there have been 3 incidents of racial harassment countywide. The incident in Hartland was posted by the accuser, and it went viral, which began the spiral of involvement by the Michigan Department of Civil Rights, the formation of Hartland's DEI committee, and investigation by the DOJ. As we all know, the former board agreed last fall to sign on for another 2 years of DOJ oversight by partnering with the Great Lakes Equity Center, or GLEC. This organization promotes critical race theory under the guise of DEI, SEL, and CASEL, all of which adhere to Marxist ideology. If you've been on that website, CASEL website, it's not hard to find. I quote from GLEC's website, "For those who are white," this GLEC's website, who we are partnering with, "for those who are white, non-disabled, Christian, non-LGBTQIA+, English-only speaking, U.S.-born, and otherwise privileged, educators, scholars, we urge you to focus your work on dismantling the racism and ableism and other oppressions you engage to maintain the system of trauma for our youth of color and intersectionally marginalized youth alongside your community of white educators." Now, call me crazy, but that sounds like racism to me. So here we are, all from a viral post by a Hartland student claiming harassment. But here's the funny thing. In January 21, 2 months before the Hartland incident even occurred, LESA Superintendent Dr. Hubert recruited consultant Horatio Sanchez, a renowned expert. Sanchez provided training for superintendents across the district. The topic was implicit bias training, which is the foundation on which DEI, SEL, and CASEL rest. Sanchez, a disciple of critical race theory guru Ibram Kendi, came back again on September 2nd and October 11th for more implicit bias training. So again, here we are. All this community turmoil, taxpayer money, and indoctrination of our kids based on 3 harassment accusations since 2021. And yet, rather than dismantle DEI immediately as directed by the President of the United States, it appears you've decided to put a temporary stop on it. The tide has changed, and it's pathetic how you are clinging to the hope of reinstating DEI or maintaining DEI. Presidential executive orders are constitutional, and after the clown shows of moving through the courts is over, the Supreme Court will vindicate the president. At that point, continuation of DEI will result in a loss of federal funding. The public outrage will be deafening. People have opened their eyes. It's over.
Frank Kraus.
It's been quite a few years since the DEI committee was formed deliberately at a level that did not require exposure. You could not attend a DEI meeting because it was a subcommittee. Now it's gone full course. The whole world is aware of what's going on DEI, and we have a executive order that is not the slightest bit, how does it put in this proposed resolution, vague and confusing. I think that this, when we get to this DEI committee resolution, that should be removed and that the board should fully accept that there is a very clear executive order that says what is to be done. I agree with the couple of ladies here that said we risk taking away of funds, and I think that would be a horrible thing for Hartland. And if you want to walk directly into the maelstrom, then you'll continue on that course or you'll comply with the order. Thank you.
Kimberly Thompson.
Hi, I want to thank you for your time that you took to have been here to hear me today. My name is Kim Thompson, and I have 2 little girls at Village Elementary. We recently had a diversity assembly that parents had not been made aware of. Neither of the option opt-in or opt-out was available. And it never had been relayed to the parents about the assembly. A child was observed holding an Islamic flag and a head wrap. The flag translates to "There is no God but Allah and Muhammad" in writing. I am unsure how this message was intended, but this school system is on a trajectory rate to lose $2.5 million in funding and go against federal guidelines. I strongly suggest reconsideration in the current board's direction. The schools district has always referenced the 3 R's: reason, respect, responsibility. I would encourage you to consider this in your decision-making process. Is this a good reason? Is this a responsible decision for the community and school? Thank you for your time.
Holly Naylor.
Good afternoon. I am here speaking as an individual, a district resident and a taxpayer, and a parent of current Hartland students. I want to say that I appreciate the measured and reasonable approach the district and board are taking on this issue. There's been some conversations about, or comments, the definitions of DEI, right? We don't need a definition. Everybody knows what it is. Or the definition of perhaps equity related, or illegal discrimination and preferences. So I'd like to give everybody a few examples of potential unintended consequences of not having an actual, clear, precise definition of what these things mean. So for example, does illegal discrimination and preferences apply to any program that is focused on, intended for, limited to a specific gender? If so, I guess our Girls on the Run program and Watchdogs will have to go, because both of those are focused on a specific gender. Does equity related mean any equity program where we are trying to provide all of our students with equal opportunities in this district? Because I'll tell you, there are families and students in this community who don't have enough food, Kids can't think, they can't learn if they're hungry. Food programs are equity programs. They are leveling the playing field for all students. So if we are not allowed to have any equity programs, are we going to close our food pantry? Also, does the I in DEI, which means inclusion, right? We have a very, very clearly focused on inclusion program in this district. It's called the Unified Athletics Program, where general ed and special ed students participate together in sports programs. This program is literally the definition of inclusion. It is an inclusion program. So if this board decides that they are canceling all programs that could possibly be related to DEI, we're canceling the Unified Athletics Program. I don't think anybody in this room wants that. I could be wrong. I'm going to give people the benefit of the doubt if they haven't considered potential unintended consequences like these, and hope that you will understand that your specific definition of DEI is not a legal definition of DEI. And in order to protect students, such as on the unified team, we need to be more informed on what we're referring to. Thank you.
Gwen Bliss.
Thank you for allowing this open forum. I have a background in K-8 special education, though I didn't choose to pursue that career when I had my kids. I have worked for over 20 years with children with special needs in club settings, and later as a director that trained other leaders. It is normal practice to require background checks and training in child safety for anyone working with children. When I heard of the DEI initiative from concerned parents for a number of years, I felt I needed to speak up. Anyone who intentionally exposes a minor to sexually explicit or violent content while demonizing or usurping the authority of the parents is grooming behavior of a predator. It is illegal. Hartland could be sued, current threats of the federal government aside. Anyone with training in child development should know children aged 7 to 12 go through a normal, healthy period where boys have cooties and girls are yucky and prefer to play with children of the same sex. Anyone who counsels a child this age that the reason they feel this way is because they are trans or homosexual causes confusion and anxiety, because most kids grow out of this stage usually by the age of 14. Education about normal bodily changes of puberty, including emotional swings, reassures children that they are normal and reduces anxiety. I support the discontinuation of DEI, aside from teaching, when it comes to racial matters, that it is not the color of one's skin, but the content of one's character, as I was taught many years ago by my excellent teachers. And because I want to see kids grow up happy and healthy, all kids, not just certain groups. Thank you for hearing us out.
I have a card here that says Jeff Scott. I assume it's not you.
It's me.
I don't.
You heard how hard it is for me to speak uninterrupted from this desk in our earlier conversation, so I'd like 3 minutes.
I need to ask you to hold on just a second, because I'm not familiar of whether or not this is, if it's legal to do.
It's fine, but he needs to go to the podium.
Okay.
He gets his 3 minutes.
Awesome. Thank you for clarifying.
It's been done. Two days after our last meeting, where the Board of Education rescinded the policy to give parents the right to expressly consent to diversity training in our schools, Village Elementary hosted the Diversity Circus to supposedly teach the 3 Rs. However, I believe the actual product of this performative assembly was inappropriate misuse of cultural stereotypes that goes against everything the 3 Rs represent. In photos shared with me, what appear to be 6, 7, and 8-year-old children are asked to stand in front of the entire school wearing stereotypical headwear from foreign countries and waving that country's flag. A boy in an extra-large sombrero waves the Mexican flag. A boy in a Kenyan tribal headdress waves the Kenyan flag. And certainly most disturbing, as has already been said tonight, a young girl is made to wear a mock hijab, waving the flag of Saudi Arabia, which bears a giant sword and reads, "There is no God but Allah. Muhammad is the only messenger of Allah." According to Muslim scholars, wearing a mock hijab is equivalent to mocking the believers themselves, equivalent to mocking Allah directly. The giant sombrero stereotype marginalizes the Spanish-speaking communities and undermines all of the efforts of Hartland schools to foster an environment of respect. How can we in good conscience do this to innocent children, all while being under the investigation of the DOJ for racial and cultural insensitivity at the highest levels of our district? The argument from the district is, well, no parents complained. As you heard tonight, there's a reason for that. The parents were not even informed about this assembly. The district does not consider the diversity circus to have anything to do with DEI, despite several other districts in the area openly citing that the diversity circus is a major component of their DEI initiatives. Furthermore, these children cannot consent to the activities they took part in. They cannot consent to be made to wear a giant sombrero and wave a flag, or to be made to wear a mock hijab and wave a flag of a foreign religion or nation. Can you imagine if we walked into this room tonight and Mr. Hughes was wearing Saudi Arabian dress and waving the Saudi flag, and then told us he was doing it in some sort of effort to spread kindness and express the America as a melting pot? That would not be tolerated. But for some reason, it's okay with 6, 7, and 8-year-old students that we are in charge of protecting. I have used the word forced when talking about students in these situations and received some flack for that. But what else can you call it when they are not given a choice? Their parents are not given a choice, and they are too young to consent or even understand the negative cultural stereotypes they are being asked to act out. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old students cannot consent. I hope the 4 members of the board that rescinded the DEI opt-in last week now see why the policy was so necessary to protect the students of this district. Milton Friedman famously said, "One of the greatest mistakes is to judge policies and programs by their intentions rather than their results." Maybe there was a positive intent with this program, but the result is embarrassing to this district and to the administrators who allowed it to occur under our roofs.
Taryn Fry.
First off, whoever scheduled this at 3 o'clock in the afternoon is unacceptable. I have to leave here at 4 o'clock to go get my son off the bus. I took time out of my day to make sure I was here to speak up. This needs to be stopped now. We're talking about our children and the funding that's going to be cut. The President of the United States is not playing. He has made it very clear he is not going to go along with this DEI. He's not playing. He's not going to fund this school. He's going to cut all expenses going to Hartland schools. This is going to affect our kids. Right now, our kids are seeing what's happening. As high schoolers, they're seeing there's been an executive order put in place by the highest ranking official in the United States. And we have a school board that says, we don't care. That is saying, we don't care what a police officer says. We don't have to follow the law. What are we doing? What are we doing? We're teaching our kids, don't follow the law. Have a good day.
Lori, is this Lori Leach?
Hi, I'm here today just to let you guys know, Kristen, Megan, Jeff Campbell, I'm going to give you a chance, but what you did last time was horrible. And Cindy Shaw, you're as disgusting as they all can be, and you should all be held accountable for what you've done to our children and us parents, putting us on lockdown, lying and saying it's a law, and going around and telling people, trust me, I have it all recorded, that you're patriots, but you're different kind of patriots. There's one patriot, okay? There isn't a different kind. We all stand by the Constitution, and this DEI is bullshit, and you all know it. What I teach my kid at home is that you guys teach them history, math, science. All of this stuff is made up, and what you're doing is criminal actions. It's treasonous. And you think it's not going to hold? It is. You're all going to be held accountable for your treasonous actions. And you know what's funny? We're all watching now. And what's sickening is you all cheated. You went to the senior homes down there because you knew the person. They told us that they didn't allow that. Well, somebody knew somebody, and you got in our senior home here right next to this building, and you lied to them. And guess what? One of them was smart enough to record. And what's sickening is you took advantage of our elderly. You're disgusting like our governor, who had done nothing but murdering to our elderly, and now you're doing it towards our children. It's sickening. Lockdowns, masks, poking them, jabbing them up the nose, because you said it was the law, Chuck Hughes. It was never the law. You know what's funny? You made it all lies and put us through hell for what? This is our community. You're supposed to be working for us, and you're not. And your little snakeity smiles, Kristen and Cindy, make me sick. You guys are horrible, and you are nothing but criminal towards our children. And I hope all of you guys get held accountable, and not our good ones. We know who you guys are. Jeff, Glenn, and not, and Greg. So I'm going to end it like this. You're disgusting, and I hope to God you get charges put on you, because you're sickening and you're wrong. And this is our town and our kids. Remember that.
Wes Nakagiri.
Thank you very much. I wanted to comment on a couple things about the DEI. What really troubles me the most is that the district did not have to enter into these agreements with the DOJ. There was no violation of federal law, and you did nothing wrong criminally, yet you signed up at the urging of Mr. Hughes to do these DEI things. I want to comment on Great Lakes Equity Center. Great Lakes Equity Center is a hate organization. On their website, they claim that you are an oppressor. Your children are oppressors if they're Christian, if they're white, if they're heterosexual, if they were born in the United States, they are oppressors. That stuff should not be taught to our children. It's just ridiculous. With regards to, your uncertainty about what you should do with regards to DEI. I've heard some arguments that, well, we've got this agreement with the DOJ, a contractual agreement with the DOJ, and that could tie our hands. And my suggestion is that you, in your resolution, don't just eliminate the DEI committee. Put a pause on everything DEI. Put a pause on everything that you're doing with regards to the contract, and then seek confirmation from the Department of Justice. I will share with you that I have written already the Attorney General and asked the Attorney General to rescind the contract. So I got to jump on you and your lawyers. Your lawyers should have thought of this long time ago. So put a pause on everything DEI, put a pause on that contract. You're not going to be in violation. You'll be stopping DEI. That is my suggestion. The last thing I want to talk about, it has come to my attention through Trustee Scott that your superintendent is trying to squash his rights to speak by saying he's creating a hostile work environment. Mr. Scott represents the citizens of this community. He is our voice. You have no right to try to stop his voice. Thank you.
That concludes call to the public. Moving on to item 2A.
It came in after call the public started,
To do that, that's the new policy, right?
not after.
turn it in during any time before call to public is over. That was what was passed a couple months ago.
I move to suspend the rules to allow the community member to speak at the call to public.
Second.
This was Greg. Greg, you created the policy, and it says very clearly prior to the start of the call to the public.
There's
a motion on the table.
motion, there's a motion on the table to waive the policy as it was, as it's printed on the card, as it was previously approved, to allow one more member to speak, one more community member to speak. Is there any discussion on the motion? I'm sorry, the motion was brought forward by Mr. Scott and supported by Mr. Gogoleski.
I'll just make a comment. I think since my name was brought up, the cards were revised. My original proposal to this board was that it was any time up to the conclusion of the call to public, but based on the temperature and some of the concerns from the board, there was some, I guess, changes made that resulted in prior to the start of. So I just wanted to clarify that, but I guess as in general, I'm supportive that anybody who comes here has the right to speak at any time. I think we have to vote on the motion.
Yeah, sorry, I'm writing this down. Okay, so is there any further discussion? Okay, I'll try to restate the motion brought forward by Mr. Scott, supported by Mr. Gogoleski. The motion is to waive the call to the public policy to allow one more person, one more community member to speak, even though the card was submitted after call to the public began. Is that appropriate?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Hearing no more discussion, Mr. Scott,
Yes.
Mr. Gogoleski,
Yes.
Mr. Keller,
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
and I am a yes. Can I have the card, please? Thank you, Renee. Christine Collins.
Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing me to speak. This is very heavy on my heart. It's very personal. I have an adopted son who is biracial. And I am a Hartland graduate. I have 3 daughters who have graduated from Hartland. And I am embarrassed to know that this is still going on. I don't care what side of the table you're on your political party. It doesn't matter to me. This is personal. If we have an executive order to follow and you don't like it, I'm sorry. My son matters. He's biracial. He's half black, he's half white, but we don't care. We love him and treat him with respect. And I would be embarrassed to have him come to this meeting and to see some of the board members not acting respectfully to other people and our behavior. I'm trying to raise a son that his character matters more than his skin color. He is loved, not because he's half black and he's half white. He is loved because he is my son. And I am embarrassed for our community. Let's get rid of this DEI. I don't care what it stands for. My son knows what Martin Luther King said because I'm teaching him about the civil rights and how Martin Luther King would be embarrassed. He would be embarrassed to know that race against me. I am a white woman raising a black son. It is embarrassing to have to stand up to him and say, I'm sorry, I'm white. This is my son. He's black. He's white. He's a human being. And I love Hartland. I'm a graduate of Hartland. I played sports. I ran track. I played basketball. We are a good community. Let's get rid of DEI and go back to reason, respect, responsibility without sneaking in DEI. I love our school. I know many of these board members, and I love you. I love you. But please, think about my son and do away with DEI, please.
Having no other cards for call to the public, we'll move on then to action items. Item 2A, DEI Committee Resolution.
I move that the Board of Education, based on the advice of council and the recommendation of the board president, in lieu of confusion and vague direction in the current EOs that are being challenged in various forums throughout litigation and other means, and because of possible impact of the existing extension agreement with the Department of Justice, the board temporarily pauses the DEI committee functions, removes any reference to it from the district's website, but reserves the right to revisit this at a later date once there is greater clarity after legal challenges to the EOs are completed or further guidance is provided by the DOJ.
Do I have support for the motion?
Support.
Motion brought forward by Mrs. Shaw, supported by Mr. Campbell. Is there any discussion?
I would like to go on the record before we start and make sure everyone in this room understands that the way this is written, it says by the, what's the exact verbiage, by the recommendation of the president who scheduled this meeting and is not here to take part in it, and by legal counsel, as of 2:40 this afternoon when I last checked my email, none of us had any further information than that simple sentence. We've received nothing from legal counsel and nothing from the president to support the resolution as written, which I find extremely disturbing.
Would you like to go ahead, Mr.
Well,
Keller?
you know, unfortunately, without President Glayback, I had many questions, kind of similar to what Mr. Scott just mentioned, frankly, trying to understand why it was worded the way it was worded. It seems more complicated and vague than it needs to be. I think the executive order itself is fairly straightforward, so to me, we've complicated a fairly simple issue, and I didn't understand why the legal team, if that's who wrote this, would write it in this manner. I don't know if, Vice President Coleman, if you have any additional insight into the language that we were presented?
I do not, but I bet Mr. Hughes does.
Yep, our legal counsel knew that there was a request by the community that the board address the issue of the DEI committee specifically based on a writing campaign that occurred over the weekend. Contacted legal counsel. President Glayback asked me to make sure I did that. Legal counsel created this resolution because there still is some work that has to take place between our legal counsel, who is the liaison with the DOJ. The DOJ is waiting for direction from the Attorney General and the counterparts that they work with in Washington to give us direction. So at the end of the day, this gets us to a point where we are in compliance with the EO in regards to the issues on the table, and it keeps us in a place where we're not simply throwing away the, telling the DOJ we're not listening to them under Title IV with the issues with that, with the Civil Rights Act. So the attorney felt this was the best resolution to allow us to make sure that we are doing the right thing and then put us in a position to come back at it if Washington's direction to their DOJ counterparts are to cancel the agreement, then we're done with it and we don't have to worry about it. So that's where we're at.
So is there a legal definition around the timing of temporarily pauses? Versus, can't we just come out right and say we eliminate? Obviously, you know, as a board, every month we meet, right? If there's an issue that we feel we need to come back on, for example, just last month, we voted to change the opt-in policy to an opt-in. So I think it, to me, is a little bit arduous to even put that in there. And I would propose that we actually change it from temporarily to permanent.
Yeah.
My recommendation is to follow legal counsel's guidance.
I would like to discuss that. I'm sorry, were you done, Greg?
No, go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry. The information that you need about the executive orders is readily available online and probably populates about 100 Google pages when you look it up. And anyone not understanding or proclaiming that they're not sure or they don't understand the executive order is either pretending or actually is, in the truest clinical definition of the word, ignorant. And I also want to cite how quickly and proactive we were with the previous administration's rewrite of Title IX. And boy, we got on that bandwagon real quick. We sure did. We were afraid of being sued. We were afraid of action being taken. Oh my, we better do something immediately. We had no problem doing that. I do not understand what the problem is with this executive order and its understanding. And if our legal team does not understand it, perhaps maybe we need a new legal team.
Okay. We have the floor. We have the floor up here. Please, quiet down.
Mrs. Shaw has asked me to address Mr. Glugoleski's comment about Title IX and how we jumped on it, just so the board remembers. It was, the new Title IX regulations came out. We were given the policies to proceed with abiding by that Title IX, and we chose not to. We did nothing. So when those Title IX regulations were discontinued, we were right back to where we were, and our policies were still in place. We hadn't changed them. So there's some misinformation there, Mr. Glugoleski. We never adopted those policies.
Well, to correct maybe this misinformation, we talked about it for months and months and months, and it was there, and we were just so worried about what we're going to do. We had how many meetings with attorneys? I'm sorry, there does not seem to be any unexplainable things about the executive order. I think it's very clear what they're talking about. It's very clear what they want done, and I think we should abide by it.
If I can make a clarification, Mr. Hughes, the board policy was not changed regarding Title IX, but the student handbook was altered.
Thank you.
In regards to bathroom usage and being able to withhold information from parents regarding which bathroom their son or daughter uses. That was modified in the student handbook.
So if this is amended to abolish the committee, and for some reason we decide we do need the committee again, we could create that pretty quickly, I do believe, right? And as far as, I think you said, Mr. Hughes, if DOJ comes back to us about the agreement, I don't think it's the DEI committee that deals with them, it's the group, right? And it was said, just to clarify, that staff-led committee, just to point out, there are two on the board involved with that committee, Mrs. Coleman and Mr. Glugoleski, which is great. They updated last meeting about that and some of the great material that was going to be, we're going to move forward with in the 25-26 school year. And I think we'll have to clarify that, but that's in that opt-in, opt-out and how to do that. We'll have to clarify that moving forward. But I think that if this is abolished, it can be quickly recreated if there is a need for it, we see. But again, if the DOJ comes to us, then it is the committee that can speak with them, not necessarily has to have the existence of the DEI committee.
I also want to address some other misinformation, too, that was put out on social media by another board member, stating HCH does not teach DEI to students. The focus of the district is respect, civility, and the 3 R's. Do not fall for the false narrative being posted on social media. Yet, we can go back all the way to 2021, where in a curriculum newsletter, we have a newsletter that has a title on it, District Social Emotional Learning and DEI Focus, 2021. And yet, apparently, we're not. The other thing, too, if you go to our 3 R's on our board website right now, you can do this on your phone. You go to the board website, and when you take a look at the 3 R's, reason, respect, and responsibility, which I will state on the record, I think is an absolutely wonderful thing to teach students. Apparently, the DOJ did not have enough faith in the board's judgment to use the word all, encompassing all students. That wasn't good enough for them. What they told us to put in, and this is my understanding, Mr. Hughes, correct me if I'm wrong, what they told us to put in our 3R policy is that based on sex, including sexual orientation or transgender identity, disability, age, height, weight, English-speaking status, race, class, ethnicity, religion, color, national origin, or ancestry, we are all Hartland Eagles. Really? Yeah.
Mr. Glogleski, once again, I'll correct you on that. The DOJ did not require us to put that in there.
That's what you told me.
No, I did not.
Oh, okay.
We had a committee, a district-wide committee at the time that was formed, teachers, board members, everybody else. We looked at barriers. Our role was to look at any barriers to procedures, processes, procedures, and practices that were barriers to students, of all students learning and enjoying everything we have to offer in the district. And the first thing that our committee decided to do was to define the 3 R's because they had never been totally defined. And we took that language right from the law regarding protected classes. So that's why it's there.
Well, I was told differently by you, and I'd like to know then, if that's the case, why did we use the word all 3 times in the respect paragraph and include all of this? Apparently, all doesn't mean all plus. So if we did this to ourselves, that's even worse.
So I have a few concerns with the way this is written beyond the mentions I had earlier about receiving nothing formal from the president nor legal counsel regarding how this, I call it a mealy-mouthed resolution was put together. As my understanding, as the resolution is written, it does not remove DEI from job descriptions. Several of Ms. Gregory's job descriptions revolve around DEI. I think we should address that to remove from job descriptions. It does not remove it from the student handbook. I brought to Mr. Hughes' attention that the student handbook and discipline rubric contain references to DEI practices of restorative justice. I was told that that was a misprint and it will be addressed. I find it hard to believe how we accidentally oops DEI into the student handbook or discipline rubric. And from my understanding as written, this would allow our elementary schools to continue the type of assemblies that I mentioned in the call to the public with the diversity circus, because the district does not consider the diversity circus as diversity training. Mr. Hughes said we really should have just called it the kindness circus. It sounds like it was a circus, If I found a photograph online of, and I have a 7-year-old daughter in the district, if I found a photograph online of my daughter wearing a mock hijab in front of 500 students, waving a foreign flag with a sword on it that said, "Allah is the one true God," after I pulled my kids out of school, I would go straight to the sheriff's office and file a police report on the incident. I believe this is not only is it culturally insensitive, demeaning, and a misuse, but it does not represent the 3 R's. It is not respectful. It is not respectful to the Muslim religion. It is not respectful to Spanish-speaking people or Mexican Americans to put a child in a giant sombrero and parade him across his school, then take pictures of it and post it online. That is not respectful. It is not responsible for us to have administrators in the buildings and in the central office that, I'll tell you, not only condone this behavior, but they doubled down. I sent an email to Mr. Hughes this morning expressing my concern about this, and was essentially told that I was I should be looking at this as how it represents all Americans, and somehow I'm in the wrong for seeing this practice as an abuse of power in the schools. And I gave Mr. Hughes and Mr. Minsker an opportunity before I brought this to the community to stand up and admit that a mistake was made, to admit that maybe somebody didn't do their homework, to admit that, yeah, maybe somebody in that room should have stood up and said to this man, "No, you're not dressing our students in a sombrero. You're not giving our students a foreign flag to wave that represents a foreign religion and has a sword on it, and you're not going to mock their religion by wearing a mock hijab." Someone should have stood up for our students. But the truth is nobody did. And as you've seen tonight, they will continue not to. And what happened in that school is not addressed in the resolution we have before us tonight. We can pass this resolution as it is, and tomorrow Round Elementary could put on that show, and then the next day Lakes could put it on and so forth. This does nothing as written to stop what's going on in our schools. And for the life of me, I cannot understand why we have administrators so dead set on forcing this on students. Controversial materials forced upon students against the will of the public. And it needs to stop.
So, go ahead, Cindy.
Thank you, Kristen. If the board approves this resolution today, we are in compliance with the executive order. The district is protected, our students are protected, if we pass it as written. The other thing I would like to remind everyone is that in the fall last year, this board approved 7-0 board goals that included a DEI committee. So, we've had plenty of opportunities throughout the years to change that or to get rid of that committee, and it was just voted to include it 7-0 last fall. The last thing I would like to do is, I hate to put Mr. Minsker on the spot, but the theme is continuous regarding race-based DEI, that we are telling our students that they are superior or inferior. Is it possible you could address those concerns? I know from having students in this district for 18 years that those conversations don't happen in front of our students. Those things are not said to our students. We don't teach those type of things to our students.
I literally just mentioned dressing a student in a sombrero and parading them across the room.
Mr. Scott, she's got the floor.
Is that?
I'm not even sure what to say.
I'm not sure what you can say either. Mine's have been made up. But I understand.
We, having the definition that Mr. Gogolewski gave last time about putting one race above another, white privilege, those things, to my knowledge, I don't know of a situation where we do that in anywhere of our curriculum. That is the only definition that I've heard, and I appreciate Mr. Gogolewski for giving that definition, because at least it gives us something to go on. I don't know, again, I don't, unless there's a specific list of what DEI is specifically on what we're supposed to do, which we're going to wait to find out from the feds on what exactly that is, that's going to tell us what we can or can't do.
With all due respect, you don't need a class that's called DEI to teach DEI. You don't need a class.
We don't have a class named DEI.
Exactly, we don't. And yet, what kind of terminology is being used in the classroom? No one's really going to be able to say that. The fact that we have all of these mentions of DEI, both in curriculum, both in our 3 Rs, I don't understand why it's there. There's no need to have it there, and it should be gone. And I will tell you, I was originally going to vote no on this resolution. I really was. The reason for it, I wanted to maintain the status quo because down the road, if we do that, we would get a full investigation by the OCR. And the OCR would go through things like the DOGE and really find all and root out all of those mentions of DEI. That's very attractive to me, but the sooner we can get rid of anything saying DEI, the better. So,
Mr. Minsker, if this isn't in our schools, would you like to go on the record on why it's okay to put a 6, 7-year-old girl in a mock hijab, give her a flag that reads, "There is no God but Allah, Muhammad is the only messenger of Allah," and parade her in front of 400 or 500 peers, then take her photograph and post it on Facebook? Would you like to go on record why that's okay?
I'm not going to sit here and say everything was okay with it. Like, you have not given a good explanation of his whole letter and an email that he gave you.
I'm happy to read it.
We talked about how there are things that we can talk about as a school district on some things with that. I mean, we're going to get an argument here back and forth about what is appropriate.
Denounce it. Denounce it. It's wrong. Denounce it. Everybody in here wants you to denounce it.
I think we're going to continue to support the differences of students in our community and our school district. We're going to continue to have students be represented and see themselves in the curriculum. And we will look at that, like we talked about, that Mr. Hughes and I talked about. We're going to look at that presentation, and the video that was shared with you didn't have that, a lot of that in that video. So when that's in there, we will look at it and address it and possibly not have that back, that presenter back. That particular presenter that we've had, I had 5 times at Round Elementary when I was there with a different presentation. This one I've never seen before, and we're going to look at it.
So you won't denounce it. You won't say it's wrong. You won't say somebody messed up in that room.
I'm not going to contribute.
And said,
I'm not going to contribute with this circus that I'm hearing right now.
It's not a circus. These are our children.
It is.
These are our children. What if that was your student forced to wear a hijab and wave a foreign flag?
I'm sorry, but if I keep talking.
That's someone's child. That's someone's child.
Yeah.
And that picture of them will remain in perpetuity.
I think, if I can interrupt, I'm sorry.
Please.
Clearly, this is something we'll have to get answers to. We will get answers to. However, Mr. Gogolewski, to your point, I think for today's purpose under 2A, it would be excellent, I think, to reach some kind of resolution. So if the verbiage isn't correct under that, if there is a motion to amend it, and then we can get resolution to why everybody's here today, understandably, to get some kind of progress. If the verbiage isn't desired, what changes can be made? What proposals would be on there to make it more acceptable?
Yeah, as I mentioned, I'll move to change the word from temporary pauses to eliminates.
Can we?
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, can we simplify this whole thing and get rid of this verbiage that no one has been able to justify where it came from?
I think it would start that the Board of Education would clearly need to take out on advice of council.
I think the simple one is based, that the Board of Education eliminates the DEI committee and related functions. Is there a reason we would have any of the other language? Again, we were not able to receive the legal opinion that was referenced, so we have no rationale provided for why this was here from the actual attorneys.
The rationale is, we told them what we wanted to do. They said, here's the resolution we would recommend. That's what we got. This is what you see. So.
But help me understand, because in this extension agreement, and, to jump to the side here for a minute, I think part of what the community continues to struggle with, and I do personally, is Section 3, page 9C. The district will implement or require attendance at a restorative justice techniques training. That's why people are in an uproar, because we continue to parade that we're not doing these things, yet all of the documentation that we have with the Department of Justice screams the other way. And I think that's where the confusion is. I'm not pointing fingers at that it is that way, but it frankly is. And I think that's where we, as a collective group, need to do better. We can't just try to say, well, really, we signed an agreement because we wanted the opportunity to teach the 3 R's that are on that board right there. That's really not what we signed up for, frankly. I know that's what we're now trying to communicate this as, but that's really not what it was.
And it seems to me that, listen, I'm all about the 3 R's, reason, respect, responsibility. But when we just try to take diversity, equity, inclusion, scratch off the top and write 3 R's on it, and then anybody who disagrees with it is a bigot, that is not fair. That is not how we need to treat this. We need to remove all of the DEI initiatives and frankly rebuild trust with this community as it relates to the 3 R's, because right now everybody in this room and everybody watching and everybody that's going to follow up on this just sees this as a little switcheroo. And it can't be that. It has to be an honest review of this district's actions and an honest attempt to make them right, not just change the name.
So where I struggle with some of what you just said there, Jeff, is that you say remove DEI initiatives. Does that, without a definition, we've talked about an actual definition of what DEI is. So you're saying the 3 words, right? One of them is inclusion. Well, a giant example, a profound example of inclusion that is going on at the high school this week is in support of our unified sports teams. They've had an entire spirit week where kids are wearing different clothes. They've got, tomorrow there's an assembly for the whole student body to be part of this basketball game. That's inclusion. That's inclusion at its finest. So if we're eliminating all DEI, how do we draw that line without a definition? How do we?
No.
I know people will say common sense, but your version of, excuse me, I have the floor. I have the floor.
Let her speak.
Thanks. So if you try to eliminate all things DEI, you have to have some type of parameters, something defined, because one person's definition of common sense or one person's perspective of common sense is different than somebody else's. So if you're just going to leave it to common sense, well, yeah, of course we'd keep, the unified stuff because that just makes sense. Well, but it's inclusion. So how, we would need to define that. To be able to take it out completely, it has to be defined.
But is it a government-forced type of inclusion, or was that organically grown within the district because we thought it was a good idea?
I guess,
You know,
why would that be different?
it would be
Why-
totally different. There's a huge difference between government-mandated items and something that is a product of the district on its own, under local control. If that happens, why would you think that that's a DEI program? No, a DEI program would be something mandated by the government, some kind of mandatory training, some kind of mandatory rule that's completely unnatural, inorganic, never was an inkling of thought at the local level, and all schools should be locally controlled. And that's the problem that I have. I don't know if we're getting, Chuck, maybe you can answer this. Are we getting any kind of government funding for that program? Was that program set up as a mandatory thing to do, or no? Or did that just come about as an idea, a good idea, within the district?
It came about because the federal government under IDEA indicated that school districts needed to be working towards a least restrictive environment for students. So most of us remember special education back when we were in school, and resource rooms, where most students that happen to have a disability, they went to the resource room. And I can tell you, when I was here in this building, when Billy said to me, well, what are you going to do about it because I'm a SPED, that really bothered me as a building principal and a human being, because Billy had been delegated to resource rooms. That's how they used to do it. So the federal government under IDEA said, listen, you need to create least restrictive environments for students. Least restrictive environment is that every student should have an opportunity to experience the classroom and the quality of instruction that is outside of a resource room specifically. So this program organically grew out of that expectation of least restrictive environment, inclusive in the building, inclusive in all programs, whether it be CTE programs, art classes, whatever you might offer. And then the program for Unified built out of Special Olympics and peer-to-peer, and our general ed students working with our special ed students to include them in a least restrictive environment, to also have activities for them to be involved in.
But it wasn't mandated by the government.
It certainly grew out of that process of the mandate.
We have not, I've seen this same false narrative spread online that somehow DEI is going to affect, like we heard today, watchdog programs or the basketball program. Listen, I am a huge fan of the watchdog program. I have spoke about it from this table. I have spoke about it as a parent, how important it is to get positive male role models into the schools. That has nothing to do with DEI. There is not a single person that is honestly believes that. So yes, we do have to have some common sense here, because the official narrative you're hearing right now is that the watchdog program is DEI, that the basketball program is DEI, but the diversity circus is not DEI. I mean, common sense.
Can I ask for clarification on that question? We talked about DEI and social emotional learning being lumped together. I keep having them lumped together. We've had an SEL program for a long time. We've dealt with that, teaching kids how to regulate, how to control their emotions, how to learn better, how to treat adults, how to use the bathroom, how to follow rules. Those are all things that we do as part of our social emotional learning. That's what that's all about, how to provide opportunities and support for all of our students when it comes to how to conduct themselves and how to treat others and how to do things like that. And I think it's important that we can't do our teaching and they can't learn unless they're set up to be able to learn. So we've always done that. School districts have always done that. I had a message today from somebody who graduated in 2006 that I had, and Chuck and I had at the high school back in the day. And she talked about how great the social emotional program was back then, and her district that her kids are going in are struggling with it and want to know what we did, because her experience was so well with it. So when we talk about definitions, that's what I struggle with, the same thing Kristen is, because we've lumped SEL with DEI, and I'm like, are we talking about getting rid of SEL then? And that's everything that we do. And that's not mandated by the government. That's something that we've always done to make sure that our environment is the right place to learn.
Right.
SEL and DEI were lumped together by you in a curriculum update in 2022. So don't act like the people at this table are magically connecting the dots all of a sudden.
But again, that's the difference in the definition of what DEI is to you and to me, because diversity, having an inclusive environment, having all those things is part of social emotional learning. It is part of what we teach our students, and we should be teaching our students.
So
But
do
you're
you think
lumping
they-
that into something that's bigger than that.
So is it your understanding then that the executive order issued by the president would include our unified basketball team?
I don't know what it means. I've read it. I have read it, and it talks about DEI initiatives, but it doesn't say what parts of those. And I can see things that you guys are talking about. There are parts of it that I can see we would not allow, and I would be in agreement with. And there's things that I'm like, well, we have a lot of other things that would fall under that or not fall under that. So it's vague to me, and until I get more guidance about what exactly we should or should not be doing, it's hard for me to say, well, what is it? As a curriculum director, as somebody who's in charge of doing that and see what kids learn and what they don't on an everyday basis, and social emotional learning is such a huge, huge part of teaching, and every teacher and that has ever gone through education and teaching children would tell you that.
The problem with SEL, and this is where all of the suspicion comes into play, SEL really started out with three main components. And for some reason, this one group called the Castle Group took over the whole concept of SEL, and now there's 5 pillars. One of those pillars is social interaction. That's the magic door that everyone is upset about. No one is upset about teaching kids to be quiet in the classroom, following a straight line down the hallway. That's not what parents are upset about. When we get into that social component of SEL, that's where the suspects, suspicions, I should say, come in. Because now we're talking about components leading into other things like DEI and CRT and the whole happy alphabet family of all of these types of programs that are designed, unfortunately, to maybe conflict with family values, with religious values, that kind of thing. That's where the anger comes in. That's where the suspicion comes into play.
And this district has broken the trust with the parents. And so, you know, it's real easy to sit up here and say, trust me, I'm here to help you. But after you sneak this stuff in, after you sneak a diversity circus into your kid's elementary school and dress people up in giant sombreros, and then say, trust me, it goes over like a lead balloon. We need to rebuild the trust with this community by starting this stuff over.
Well, I do want to come back again to the contract, because effectively we're just talking about pausing a DEI committee, which it's not even called out that we had to have one in the first place in this agreement. But, you know, and if you read through this, given that the MAP Center is not even operational, I don't understand how we would fulfill this anyways, because they don't exist. So why, I guess my point is, why is that not part of what's in this resolution? There's nothing that says we're pausing the contract. So what exactly are we doing then with this resolution?
And that contract, I assume when you say that contract, that's the current DOJ
the extension agreement that was signed one year ago.
Right, I just want to make sure I knew what you were talking about. Because that, I don't believe, is affected by what the EO is requiring us to do. The contract right now, the agreement, all the activities have been paused. We're waiting for further input. Our attorney is working with the contact from the DOJ. They're figuring out what to do next. Obviously, everything's in flux from the federal level all the way down. So that contract is not directly part of what we need to decide on today in order to hit the deadline for the EO. So I think that's why that contract is not specifically mentioned in the resolution. That's my take.
We keep hearing everything's on pause, yet the diversity circus was in town last week. Those two things don't add up.
Well, we can get rid of a committee. That's easy enough. But that does nothing to these other things like Mr. Scott was mentioning, the diversity circus and all that. We still have a long way to go. Getting rid of a committee is such super level fluff. It does nothing to ensure that the DEI that's mentioned by the executive order is rooted out. And that's an issue. For example, too, I just saw something about in Livonia. They have the Trails system, and I know we have the Trails program here. We don't?
We did in 2022.
Yeah. We had it, and then we changed it, right?
We have never had the Trails program. We went through training. 20 people from the district.
Mr. Gogolewski, could I see that curriculum newsletter?
I know what it says in there.
Well,
And I'm telling you what that means. We looked at it as a resource. We had multiple trainings from multiple different places, and we took the best that we thought, we Hartlandized it, we created our own presentation. All of our lessons are not Trails lessons, they're our own Hartlandized things that we took.
Okay, getting back to my point real quick before you go on, Jeff. In Livonia, there was a homework assignment given out as part of a Trails program put out by the Castle Group. And what the homework assignment was this big round diagram, and it asked kids to rate how they fit into different categories, and it was racial categories, and it was just, it was everything that you could do to force a kid into thinking about racial division, about ethnic division, and instead of, no matter how well-intentioned it was to be, it was something that was incredibly egregious to the families that saw what was given out to their kids. And now I don't know what's going on as a result of that, but I do know that they're launching a little investigation of it. So
I'm going to read briefly from the Hartland Consolidated Schools Curriculum Newsletter dated January 2022. Mr. Gogolewski read the headline earlier, District Social Emotional Learning and DEI Focus by Dave Minsker, Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum. There's 3 bullet points. Bullet point number 2, our middle school and high schools have started the implementation of the evidence-based program Trails, which provides universally designed lessons to teachers for students centered around the 5 CASEL competencies. Some of the lessons focus on diversity, empathy, and mindfulness. We are excited about the future of this program.
The CASEL competencies, even though I understand what you're saying, if you look at each one of those competencies, I'm in favor of all 5 of those, if you look at just that. The argument that I got back in the day when people were arguing about CASEL was the people who started CASEL. I don't care what side of the aisle, I don't care what the political affiliations are for anything that we do, whether it's an author, whether it's a program or anything that we do. If it's right for Hartland kids, we will use it. And the CASEL program, we use that just to guide kind of our principles of what, if you look at the CASEL, those competencies and you look at those are all appropriate for how we teach our social emotional learning. I don't speak for how it got created and all those kinds of things.
But you just stood here and said, we do not use Trails and never have used Trails. That's my point.
The principals all have it. I have it in my office in a binder. The lessons that were created, they're not Trails lessons. They're the things that are in front of kids. I've had it in there. I've had many board members in the last 2 years have come in and looked at those lessons and have seen them. And I have yet, other than one person telling me there's not enough white kids pictures in there, then I haven't had one complaint about anything that's in those lessons, not one. So if there is any complaint in those lessons and any of our SEL program, and that's what our program is those lessons. If you have any issues with any of those, I want to hear them, and I haven't heard one yet.
resolution. There's not been a specific amendment resolution made that I have.
I'm going to move to amend the motion to read as follow. That the Board of Education disband the DEI committee and subcommittee immediately. Furthermore, that the superintendent provide a report to the Board of Education prior to the March 17th, 2025 meeting containing a list of all DEI, SEL, CRT, or otherwise controversial materials included in district curriculum, training, job descriptions, student handbooks. Would anybody like to add to that list?
I can tell you I won't be able to do that, and I won't meet that deadline because we don't have a definition specific to what you're asking for.
How could they,
Well, I think otherwise controversial defines. I'm open to defining DEI.
well, I guess going from the definition that Glenn provided earlier, saying that DEI is something that's government mandated, that if it's something like our unified team or the Unified Spirit Week, it's organically grown in our district, but the diversity circus was not government mandated. So, but you're saying that that's considered DEI. But that goes against what Glenn defined as DEI. So there's no clear definition, there's no clear path for Chuck or anybody on his team to be able to provide a list of these things if you can't define it.
So let's define it using the EO and the letter from the U.S. District of the U.S. Department of Education Office of
They
Civil
haven't
Rights.
defined it either, Jeff, so.
They
that's
defined
very
it pretty
vague.
well.
No, they have not.
So we could say that the Board of Education disband the DEI committee and subcommittee immediately. Furthermore, that the superintendent provide a report to the Board of Education prior to the March 17th, 2025 meeting containing a list of any materials that may be considered oppositional to executive orders of the President of the United States or the direction of the U.S. Department of Education Office of Civil Rights letter received by the district February 14th, 2025.
So I can,
Second.
I can just
Support.
answer that right now and say, I'll just give you our whole curriculum and say, there you go. Because the word may, anybody can have an issue with anything.
That's fine.
So there's a motion to amend the resolution. Motion was presented by Mr. Scott. Did I hear support
Second.
here from Mr. Keller? I think jumped on that. I do not have, I don't have that captured, particularly the last couple lines that you just added that last time through.
You give that to her.
I didn't write it down either.
Yeah.
Did we capture it?
No, I think there might have to be we might have to rewatch the recording on this one. Is there any further discussion on this amendment motion? I personally don't think that it's feasible. I don't think that it's executable, at least not, the expectation that I believe you have in wording it the way that you did, I don't think that expectation can be met without a valid, understood definition of what exactly you're looking for. Because if it's government mandated, as Glenn had mentioned, I mean, I'm not aware of any government mandated curriculum.
We just had the DOJ tell us last year or the year before that we had to meet with the Midwest and Plains Equity Center, and that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about, where we get into those programs that we've been told we have to enact. So.
Yeah, I think DEI can be government mandated, but there's certainly there's things that don't have to be government mandated that are still DEI and still exist in our schools. So I think if they may fall under the executive orders or the letter we received from the U.S. Department of Education Office of Civil Rights, we should be able to identify those things based on what's cited in that letter. If Mr. Hughes needs to use outside legal counsel as part of that activity, that's fine. If he reports back to us that somehow that deadline is not attainable and we want to look at extensions, that's fine. But I think we need to leave here today with a plan on how that's going to be accomplished.
I think we need to take the time to get this right and not have anything vague in it. Mr. Scott, I agree with you, but you used words that may be or shouldn't be, which I get because it's hard to say. And we hear everybody talking still, and we want to get it right. We just don't want to have any confusion which now I believe is in 14 days, you're requesting he provide this to us, which if he's saying that isn't realistic, it may not be fair to set that. But I'd like to really nail down what this is going to be that we're voting on and make it as concise as we can, as opposed to go back on the record and
If I can offer a suggestion, you guys all have access to all the curriculum documents. You guys, Mr. Hughes gave it to you before. Everything that we teach, all the state standards, all the stuff is on the site that you can look at it, make a list, and tell me what I'm not supposed to have in front of kids.
Well, then, wait a minute. Who gets paid to do this?
Well, but
I mean, whose job?
I'm not getting any definition. Everything that we currently do, I completely support. So
Now, I just heard you and Mr. Hughes say, well, I'll just give it to you, and you look at no.
No, but I need
that's someone's job.
I need a, well, then tell me what I'm supposed to be looking for. You're saying DEI. What the hell is it?
It's clearly defined. Do we have a copy of the letter from the Office of Civil Rights from last week? We don't have that?
I've got a copy of the extension agreement.
Does anybody in the room have a copy of the Dear Colleague letter sent by the U.S. Department of Education Office of Civil Rights? No, the one sent last week on the 14th, the one dated the 14th to remove DEI by the end of the month. Ms. Braden, could you pull that up? I'll pull it up. I don't like to use electronic devices at the board table.
Vice President Coleman, can we have a point of order here to get back to this amendment that's on the table and vote on this amendment?
Yes, noted. Short of having that letter, I'm not exactly sure what you need from the letter, the definition.
It includes very specific definitions about what the U.S. Department of Education is trying to remove from the schools. So I think it would be very pertinent to our motion.
I motion that we break and allow for that to be looked up.
Is there a second to that motion?
Support.
All right. Oh, so I'm sorry. I thought you were going to.
I
look
don't
it up.
have internet access.
Okay. Okay. So short of that, I don't think we need the break, do we? Or someone else? I don't have access to.
we still have to vote on it.
Nobody
The
can pull
motion's
up
been made.
the letter?
I'm sorry.
I mean, this is the basis of our entire discussion.
What
I
did you
think if you
say?
pass the motion that you want to use the letter as a reference, then the motion passes, then I guess I got to go look at the letter. But if the
Sounds
motion
fair.
doesn't pass, it's a moot point.
Well, that was my argument, that the letter clearly defines it. So we don't need to redefine what the U.S. Department of Education has already defined, as long as we reference that letter with specific language and the executive orders from the President of the United States.
So the motion on the table was to break, to pause the proceedings so we could produce the letter and then return the discussion.
Correct.
And Greg, you seconded that. Or no, you supported it.
But we think as long as we reference the letter, the definition in the letter, then we don't need to break. Is that?
I
No,
think
we're
we
going
should
to
just
break
get
to
the
get the
letter.
letter.
We're going to break to get the letter? Okay.
Mr. Hughes is going to get the letter.
Glenn, were you?
We're voting.
If it
We're voting.
passes, I'll reference the letter. So if you pass that motion, that that's what you want to do, then the letter is what I'll use as my guidance. So it doesn't really matter. Either
But
in there-
for factually, let's get the letter. We want the letter, it was brought up, can we vote on that
Yeah.
motion?
Yes, okay, so the motion on the table, and I'm sorry, was it Mr. Scott or Mr. Gogolewski who brought forward the motion?
Oh, I did.
Okay, thank you.
Are we talking like a 5-minute recess, correct?
Yes,
Something very brief so that the public knows they can stick around.
yes. So the motion was brought forward by Mr. Gogolewski, seconded by Mr. Keller, to have a brief recess to produce the letter referenced from the US DOE.
The February 14th Dear Colleague letter.
Yes, that is the letter, Feb 14. Okay, any further discussion? Okay, Mr. Scott.
Yes.
Mr. Gogolewski.
Yes.
Mr. Keller.
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw.
No.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Motion carries. We'll have a 5-minute recess. We will reconvene. It's 4:52. We'll reconvene the meeting. As Mrs. Gogolewski in the audience here reminded, we do have another motion on the table currently that we should have actually motion to postpone, not to table, but to postpone until after the recess. So my apologies for not following the correct procedure. But we are now back in session. We will reconvene the discussion of, there's an original proposal or original motion with the resolution as stated on the agenda. Then Mr. Scott, seconded by, I believe, Mr. Keller. Yes. Motion to strike that verbiage, replace it with other verbiage. And then the ensuing discussion brought us to this letter because we were looking for definitions so that Mr. Hughes and his team would be able to fulfill the request in the newly amended verbiage for this resolution. I think that gets us, does that bring us back to where we left off?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay.
And so the letter, I mean, there's on the page 3, about halfway down, it says, this letter provides notice of the department's existing interpretation of federal law. Additional legal guidance will follow in due course. So I think in reference to this letter and its interpretation of federal law as we're discussing, and any future guidance that will be associated with this letter, I think would be sufficient to define DEI.
I also want to add to this, on page 2, the very top paragraph of page 2, this is a very good definition here. Educational institutions have toxically indoctrinated students with the false premise that the United States is built upon systemic and structural racism and advanced discriminatory policies and practices. Proponents of these discriminatory practices have attempted to further justify them, particularly during the last 4 years, under the banner of diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, smuggling racial stereotypes and explicit race consciousness into everyday training, programming, and discipline. So essentially, wherever there's an emphasis on race consciousness, are we aware? Are we considering our privilege? Do we have inherent bias? All of those things. That's all part of DEI.
So what this amendment then that is proposed, this paragraph is the guidance that Mr. Hughes and his team are going to use for what will be prepared for the board. Is that correct?
I think the whole document is what should be used, because there's other sections of this document that are pretty explicit as well.
In reference to court cases.
For example, on the bottom of page 3, last paragraph, all educational institutions are advised to, 1, ensure that their policies and actions comply with existing civil rights law, 2, cease all efforts to circumvent prohibitions on the use of race by relying on proxies or other indirect means to accomplish such ends, and 3, cease all reliance on third-party contractors, clearinghouses, or aggregators that are being used by institutions in an effort to circumvent prohibited uses of race. That could include things like materials from the Castle Group. That could include materials from the Great Lakes Equity Center, for sure.
I think we need to reference this letter in the
entire
action.
thing.
And not pull from it.
So we could kind of, you know, I know there's a motion and amendment on the table, but I think the direction this is going is that we remove the DEI committee and then ask the superintendent to provide a plan to come into compliance with this letter. Is that kind of the direction we see this going? I mean, it'd be great to just say, superintendent get in compliance with this letter immediately, but that I think goes beyond the scope of what he's, you know, if there's policy that has to come across the board
So to give
table.
him and his team guidance, compliance with this letter looks like what? Does that mean providing anything that would go against this letter to the board for us to review and approve? Is that
In place.
looking at correct curriculum that
Right now.
only is defined by what's in this letter
Yeah.
as DEI?
I see it coming back as a plan to say, okay, here's the policies we need to revise to be in compliance. Here's the handbook items we need to revise to be in compliance. Here's the job descriptions we need to revise to be in compliance. Here's the policies and protocols we need to revise to be in compliance. Yeah, and then the board can take action on those.
So to confirm, and if you could please restate your amendment so we know exactly what we are voting on,
Can I ask a question?
please.
So what I'm hearing then from a curriculum standpoint, just from my world, anything that has to do with race is what I'm looking for.
That's the clarification I was asking for as well.
That's what I'm seeing in this document.
Yes.
And then I have a question about history, social studies, about what's,
If you're making the statement that any mention of race, period, is a violation of DEI, that's not what this says.
race consciousness.
Consciousness, yes.
I don't know how you do that. If you're teaching about slavery, you're teaching about indigenous people.
Well, there's a difference between consciousness and fact. If we're teaching about slavery, that's real, that existed, that was horrible. If we're teaching about, oh my gosh, we need to give reparations, that's consciousness.
Yeah, smuggling racial stereotypes, so a good example might be like taking a 7-year-old and putting a giant sombrero on his head and giving him a Mexican flag to wave in front of his whole school. I'd say something like that.
So again, if the amendment can please be read again so that the board knows exactly what we are voting on.
All right, so I'll
Slowly, please, so that
restate,
Mrs. Coleman can write it down.
restate the motion a little more clear now that we have this letter. That the Board of Education disband the DEI committee and subcommittee immediately, period. Furthermore, that the superintendent provide a report to the Board of Education March 17th is a short time period, but that's what I said. Prior to the March 17th, 2025 meeting containing a plan to bring Hartland Consolidated Schools into compliance with the United States Department of Education Office for Civil Rights, quote, dear colleague, quote, letter sent to the district on February 14th, 2025.
It is also important to remember that just eliminating the word DEI committee from our thing does not put us in compliance with the executive order. It doesn't. That's a step, one small step.
I think, Mr. Scott, in your first sentence, we may want to add something that would include and related activities, which exists, I think, in the original motion. So eliminate the DEI committee and related activities.
Okay.
And again, I think we have to be careful because we're defining that as what? What are related activities? Who's making that determination? I think that's what we have to be careful of, right? We've had a lot of examples of, we could get 8 different opinions around this table about related activities.
Well, there's something called due diligence, and I think if we show that we made the best effort to do our due diligence, whether or not it's still up for debate or what have you, by making that effort, we showed that we have taken a step towards meeting the requirements of the executive order.
Or you could use the current language that and DEI committee functions.
You can do whatever you want.
Mr. Hughes, can
And
you,
that's what the attorneys used.
You can do whatever you want, and whatever, put it on the table. We'll work through it.
I see a function, though, as something the committee does, meets, acts, gathers material, whereas, somehow narrowing down what related activity is.
right, that's what I'm trying to say is related activities is, it's too broad, right? We don't have, as we've said for the last 2 hours, we don't have a definition for what those things are.
Well, I think the diversity circus after tomorrow is pretty much a, that's a dead subject right there. But I think they're talking about that sort of thing.
So are there further changes that we want to make to what Mr. Scott has read? Do we want to sub out and related activities to use some of the language here, the DEI committee functions? We need to narrow down what this new verbiage is going to be.
I mean, I'm supportive either way. I think whether we cease activities, we really have two different things going on in this motion. One, to disband the DEI committee, which is the most egregious of the violations of the Dear Colleague letter. And then we have furthermore asking the superintendent for a plan related to coming in compliance. So I think I do like having some specifics about what we're disbanding there, but even if we don't, I think it's still relayed in the compliance part of the plan to become compliant.
So then the motion that you read 10 minutes ago is the one that is standing? We're not making changes to that?
The motion I read since we recessed has not been seconded, I don't believe. So
Well, I'm not sure if it's final, that's why I'm asking. Are we making any further changes? So again, we know exactly what we are voting on.
You still have the original motion sitting out there.
Correct.
And an amended motion, and now kind of, so I don't know if we want to clear the table before we go further, or how the best way to move is.
Yeah, let's catch up and clear the table. That would be good.
My understanding was that what you had read just recently was the same thing as what you read before. So I thought we were restating the same amendment. So
Yeah.
we only have two motions on the table. There's the original motion, and then there's the motion to amend.
With some clarity provided from our recess. Yes, I
Yes.
agree with that.
Okay. So that's all we have. So the next vote that we make will be on the amendment, whether or not we're going to amend the resolution. Is there any further discussion or any other changes that someone would like to suggest to the amendment?
I just need to clarify that when I'm creating this plan and looking at all the pieces, that I get to use common sense. And if I provide something to you and you say, well, why isn't this on there, that you understand that I use common sense to say, I'm not doing that.
I would just say to err on the side of caution, and if you think that, 30, 40, 50% of the parents in this community may have issue with that be presented to their children, then that's the kind of thing that should raise a red flag.
So that we understand what this is going to look like if this passes. We will receive information from Mr. Hughes as a board. We will get a list, a document, and the plan after that is, what will the board do? Is the board going to bring that, look at those items and yes, no, those items and bring that to a vote to the table? Or are we just asking for information from Mr. Hughes?
I would, go ahead.
The way it's spelled out is that Mr. Hughes is providing information to
Correct.
us. He's providing a report to us.
Information.
A plan, a list of items essentially that need to be addressed.
Yes.
And perhaps a plan, or at least next steps to get us to
Yeah.
be in compliance.
Yeah, and I am completely, I am in 100% support of that.
And then it would be, my thought, it would be the board to decide, yes, we want to move forward with policy changes, or yes, we want to move forward with handbook changes, or there may be some things that the superintendent and the administrative staff are able to kind of take on their own without us.
Yeah, the policy changes, obviously, that sits with the board regardless, and handbook has always been something that the board does as well. So if there are any changes to those would come before the board. Any further discussion on the amendment? So the amendment, the motion that's on the table is to amend the resolution. First, it was brought forward by Mr. Scott, seconded by Mr. Keller. Could you read it one more time, please?
That the Board of Education disband the DEI committee and subcommittee immediately. Furthermore, that the superintendent provide a plan to the Board of Education prior to the March 17th, 2025 meeting with a plan to come into compliance with the U.S. Department of Education Office for Civil Rights Dear Colleague letter dated February 14th, 2025.
Okay, thank you. Hearing no further discussion? Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Gogolewski?
Yes.
Mr. Keller?
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
And I am a yes. Motion passes.
I would like to say that I am extremely proud to be a member of this board right now, and we've shared disagreements between us, and I think we were able to stand above that and do what's right for the children of this community. So I personally think, I know we have a final vote to make, but I'm going to personally thank each and every one of you for coming together on this. I think it's a great step forward for unifying the district. So thank you to all of you.
So the remaining motion on the table was the original resolution, which we have now amended. So now this is to approve the resolution as it is now stated. Is everyone on board with that?
The amended,
The
not
amended-
this statement, the one.
Correct. The
Okay.
amended version of the resolution is what is on the table right now. Any further discussion?
So I do want to read a letter that I received just prior to the meeting from Representative Wolford, who I had a conversation with about our meeting tonight. And so I just want to read this to the board. It's actually addressed to Mr. Hughes, and it just says, Superintendent Hughes, it is my understanding that the Hartland Consolidated School Board of Education will soon be considering temporarily pausing a partnership related to diversity, equity, and inclusion that Hartland Schools recently adopted alongside the U.S. Department of Justice. I would encourage Hartland Schools to repeal this partnership as soon as possible. The residents of Hartland, especially those with children in your schools, should be able to be perfectly certain that their community schools are complying with federal law. Because of President Trump's recent executive order prohibiting DEI policies, Hartland schools should definitely cease to enforce their racial harassment training and programming agreement with the DOJ. In addition to now constituting violations of federal law, DEI programs promote preferential treatment of individuals based on their race, which is definitionally, racist. Furthermore, the direct involvement of a federal department, one with no direct ties to education policy for that matter, with one of our local school contradicts the notion that the locally elected school board ought to decide how to operate and dictate the policies of the schools under their supervision. Hartland Schools' DEI partnership is completely backwards and absurd, both in content and in how it came to be passed in the first place. As one of the state legislators elected to represent the Hartland area, I believe advocating for our local community's parents and their interests in the children's education to be among my chief responsibilities. Because of this, I encourage the Board of Education to not only pause their DEI agreement with the DOJ, but to permanently end this program as soon as possible.
Can you give them my phone number and send them my email?
Absolutely.
Mrs. Coleman,
When I don't get it,
we,
it doesn't really mean.
we have a resolution here to vote on.
Yes. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Gogolewski?
Yes.
Mr. Keller?
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Motion carries. Item 3A, future. Item 3A, future meetings. Our next meeting is March 17th here in the boardroom at 6:30 PM. We are adjourned.